大家好，杨荣文点明方向，美国没有立场去为了台湾与中国开战。
And the US is in no position to go to war with China over Taiwan. And China, I don't think will be adventurous. Then there's the India-China relationship, which will be very important right up to the end of the century. And that, I think, is gradually on the mend.
Yes.
So we are in a good part of the world.
No, so when you said a rising China for ASEAN nations and ASEAN +6 as well, see, I look at it the way that America was rather generous for the better part of the century with other powers to go along with it. China's rise is also testament to that the sole superpower there, America, let China grow and build these capabilities without being too coercive. Do you think China would be so magnanimous? Sitting in India, I have my doubts.
Well, I think the Chinese have a long history. They've always had paper, they record everything. And it's not possible in any conversation in China not to make repeated references to historical experiences. China is therefore quite predictable, and it is a conservative power because of its long recorded history. And its instincts are to maintain its homogeneity. The Chinese don't want to be like France or Great Britain or America, where in creating an empire, you bring the external proletariat into your internal domains. So if you look at London, Paris, New York, sometimes you wonder where the white people are. But in China, it's a very different feeling in Shanghai or Beijing or Guangzhou or Chongqing. They're homogeneous and they like being homogeneous. I mean, the whole of China, which has twice the population of Europe, has only one literature, one written language. A Chinese primary school student can recite the Analects from Confucius, written over 2,000 years ago, with little difficulty. This is how stable the civilization is. And the mentality is always to build walls around itself. You don't build walls to attack others. You build walls to maintain yourself. Sometimes when you go to China, and I go there very often, I must have been there 10 times in the last 1 year, you feel that they can get on with the rest of the world without the rest of the world. Sorry, they can get on with their lives without the rest of the world. So in India, I understand that there are anti-Chinese feelings, especially after Gao won. I don't think they will continue because historically, between India and China, there's been no history of antipathy. And people don't hate each other. They may dislike each other's governments or systems, but ordinary Chinese don't dislike Indians. Ordinary Indians don't like Chinese. All Chinese know that Buddha came from India, but they see him as Chinese, you know. They see Avalokiteshvara, they know he's Indian, but he's venerated everywhere in China as a Chinese.
Yes. And I'm actually going to ask you about the Buddhist question because that I see that as an eventual flashpoint when the current Dalai Lama eventually passes and the succession begins, the process begins for the 15th Dalai Lama. So I'll ask you that. But fundamentally, Mr. Yo, what you were saying that they're very inward looking, they're very homogenous, they believe in a clean linear way of thinking, right? In such a situation, are they okay with other powers in Asia rising at the same time as they are?
You know, China, even in its classical period, under the Tang Dynasty, they lived in a multipolar world. They've always accepted the reality of a multipolar world. They've always had more neighbors than any other major power on the planet. They've elaborated a very skillful statecraft to handle multiple problems on its borders at the same time. But do they have a wish to incorporate 1 million Indians or 1 million Russians or 1 million Southeast Asians into the domain? I doubt it. You know, in a crisis, the foreigners leave.
Yeah, COVID.
And then they come back. Then they leave again. So you find all Hindu communities in China in previous dynasties, they came, they left, they came back, they left again, following the cycles of Chinese history. No, I don't think China is an expansionist power. Of course, you have border problems. There are border problems with Russia, and they came to blows over it. It's a longer border than with India, but they've since cleaned it up. It's no longer an issue. one day the border of India will also be cleaner. And with India, it's more complicated because between the Raj and dynastic China, there was never any delineation. I mean, we talk about the McMahon line, but the McMahon line was delineated with the local Tibetan government at a time when London accepted Beijing as suzerain. So in the Chinese mind, it has no legal validity. So I think both sides will, in the end, take a practical approach.
Spoken like a true Singapore statesman, always making sure that India and China work together. How do you see, you have delineated your thoughts in a new Panchil 2.0 sort of thing. First of all, Mr. Your Panchil, it brings up PTSD memories of, the first Panchil, which eventually led to an India-China war of 62. What would this new age Panchil 2.0 look with greater India-China cooperation?
No, I won't say that Panchil led to the war. Panchil would have developed but for the war. And despite the war, both sides in their worldview have never departed from Panchil. I mean, I don't see India invading other countries. I don't see India wanting to impose Indianness onto other societies. Of course, India will have its influence. You will always have its aura, its mandala spreading well beyond India. So to China. And Southeast Asia, when the two mandalas overlap. And in their overlap, they created the Bandung Declaration, which at its heart was Panchil. So it's a Western view which is very foreign to us, that you live, I die. I live, you must die. And the borders are hard. And that either my values prevail or your values prevail. I don't think you find that in Hinduism. You don't find that in Chinese philosophy. We can have multiple values and still be ourselves.
How do you see a Panchil 2.0 in this age of, AI and this great arms race over artificial intelligence? China is right at the cusp. I mean, its models either better than or as good as American closed models.
There was a time when the Americans felt so advanced in AI that no one could ever catch up. I remember what Sam Altman, OpenAI, said to Indian businessmen.
Don't make frontier lab.
Yeah, India, don't waste your time. You can never catch up. Then China came up with DeepSeek, and China made it open source, which means that, hey, even Singapore can make use of large language models and retain our own confidentiality and data security, a certain degree of AI sovereignty. So I don't see one AI mega power in the world. I see a proliferation of AI everywhere. And sometimes it will grow exponentially, it will become viral. Then it meets countervailing power. So you remember just a couple of weeks ago, a model in OpenAI's sandbox escaped. And then pummeled Hugging Face with tens of thousands of questions. And Hugging Face tried to use American models to subdue this virus, But they could not because they were all under similar guardrails. And this virus has already escaped guardrails. So in the end, Hugging Face had to use a Chinese model to subdue this Frankenstein. In the same way, there'll be Frankensteins emanating from China, and we may need American models, or maybe in the future Indian models to subdue it. In a sense, it'd be like a biological war, where tumors may grow, epidemics may grow, but in the end they find their limits, because intelligence in the biological world is distributed. I see the same thing happening in AI. I don't believe in the singularity of there being one godlike system which controls all of us. This is the current Silicon Valley God complex. It is approaching hubris.
Tell me this. This is a perception that I feel, and it also stems from the way Chinese diplomacy used to happen for the last couple of decades. This debt trap diplomacy, where loans were given, and eventually some sort of sovereignty was given in lieu if loans weren't paid up on time. That's the worry with these open source models by China, where companies, if they use these open models by China, which are remarkably cheaper than American closed models, that companies that are using those open models will lose their alpha to these Chinese, and China will come up with competing companies like that. Is that perception valid?
No. In fact, that perception is being deliberately promoted as part of information warfare by the West against China. You are more likely to lose your alpha to a closed system like Anthropic or OpenAI than to a Chinese system, which by definition cannot control your alpha. And interestingly, this was what the CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp, has been saying. He said, you don't lose your alpha by relying on closed systems. You need to control your own application layer so that what data you don't want to share, you can keep, for which you will need open source. So it's the opposite. If India wants to keep its alpha, it needs to go open source. In the immediate period, it may have to rely on Chinese open source models, and I don't see anything wrong with that. But your objective must be eventually to have your own and to achieve a degree of AI sovereignty. You can't do that with American systems.
Mr. Yeo, tell me, so with all this that you've just delineated about the war, the AI war, it's not a war, it's a race, an arms race, let's put it that way. What do you think that Mr. Xi Jinping and Mr. Narendra Modi right now are thinking? I don't know if they're talking as candidly as maybe you and I are, but what are they thinking when they see what America is doing right now with its hard power as well as its soft power? And how do you think they're framing their strategy for the next 10 years?
No, actually, India-China relations were proceeding quite well. Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping had met many times in many places, and always with utmost courtesy and with the view that the war is big enough to accommodate both India and China and many other powers. It was only after Gaowan that relations suddenly took a sharp turning for the worse. And it was partly the result of maybe opportunism that, oh, well, okay, this since America is against China, maybe we also turn against China, we ally of America, then India can gain many benefits. And America dangled this carrot before India. But since the Ukraine war broke out, and then India had this air battle with Pakistan, it's quite clear that each side calculates in its own self-interest that this romance is not a true romance, it's just an adult relationship. we are here, okay, but it's daylight, we are
exactly
going on with our own life, And India will stay true to Russia because Russia is an old friend. And the US has its own agenda in Europe and the Middle East. India shares some of them, India doesn't share all of them. So I see India now gradually re-triangulating in order to have a more normal relationship with China. The Chinese are also understanding the dynamics involved, making it easier for this future to be brought forward. And I see step by step the pilgrimage to Kailash reopened, the 3 mountain passes just reopened for trade, more direct flights. In China, I see many Indian business people now. And when I go to India, so many questions to me about China. So I see the ice cracking.
I just want to come back to the Hormuz question. Essentially, you saw seeing this flashpoint. It's not even a choke point; it's a flashpoint now over there. When you look at that and you look at the Straits of Malacca sitting over there, what is quantifiably different between both the straits? And do you have any worry that this could also be weaponized, the Malacca Straits ever?
No, of course. In fact, I was in the military before. And one scenario which we cannot escape is the blockading of the Straits of Malacca and the Straits of Singapore. I mean, 3 countries control the Straits of Malacca and Singapore: Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. But beyond that, there's the South China Sea in one direction, and there's the Andaman Sea and the Bay of Bengal in the other direction. If we start playing games and adding friction, hey, others can do the same. Then how does it benefit us? So all of us would much rather prefer an open regime where there is freedom of peaceful navigation. We don't We facilitate trade, we don't impede trade. And this was the Straits of Hormuz before Iran was attacked. But if we put ourselves in Iran's position, if you are attacked and your leaders are decapitated, then of course, every means at your disposal, you will have to use to defend yourself. So this is the situation where we are in. Can we go back to that past? I doubt it, because there's so much hurt, so much distrust. So a practical way must be found forward. But I will not use the Straits of Hormuz as a template in our own region. There'll be madness. But if one day a major power were to attack Indonesia or Malaysia or Singapore and decapitate these leaders, then will they then do something about the freedom of navigation of ships from the aggressive power? Or I think we would, in desperation.
So when you look at this idea between Iran and Oman talking about some sort of fee, and they model it after the way the Malacca Straits fee is done, MSP, the Malacca Straits Patrol fee is done, is there equivalence over there, or is this completely different?
We were used to a world where there was international law, international regulations, and all these matters were depoliticized. Increasingly, they have been weaponized. And increasingly by the Americans themselves, who were the original guardians. So we're into a new world, and we better make sure that in our own region, what you call ASEAN +6, that among us there's a common understanding that is in our collective interest to have freedom of navigation between the two oceans, which means China, ASEAN, and India.
Right.
That is entirely in our own interest. We don't want to learn from the Middle East. We'd rather they learn from us.
I want to ask you about, now I want to go back to the Buddhism part earlier in our interview. Now I want to bring that in. Now, see, I foresee a potential flashpoint over here when eventually the question about the 15th Dalai Lama comes in. How do you see all of this panning out? You have a situation where Dalai Lama A is appointed by China, and then you have a Dalai Lama B appointed by the Tibetan religious institutions over here in India. What happens then in that situation? And sorry, before you answer, I'm also saying we are noticing also sustained efforts by China to claim heritage over the Buddhist religion and faith as well. It's a very Chinese thing as well. So how do you see that pan out?
No, when Buddhism went to China, the Chinese mandarins were full of misgivings. In fact, when the emperors dabbled too much in religion, they were criticized by officials, and these officials were punished. But in the end, the Confucianist mindset prevailed, which is those who govern a vast country should not dabble in religion, because this will create all kinds of other problems. So when Buddhism entered China, the mandarins created a system where the monks were to be kept in monasteries and temples. You don't interfere in political affairs. But on the Tibetan highlands, the High Lamas, they perform a dual role of being religious power and political power. And for this reason, for centuries, the incarnation of High Lamas on the Tibetan plateau had to be approved by the Emperor of China. This went back to the Ming Dynasty. And even the Dalai Lama's own accession had to be approved by Chiang Kai-shek's government. I mean, that's part of history. And whoever becomes the next Dalai Lama will have to be approved by Beijing. Now, he may be reincarnated, one may be reincarnated outside China, but I don't think it will have much impact.
Do you think but Mr. Yao, but do you think that will have acceptability just because there is political sovereignty over the region, right? You're talking about approval by Beijing, but would that assuage the concerns of believers? For example, someone sitting in Myanmar, Thailand, or Cambodia, would they recognize a Dalai Lama appointed by the Tibetan system in India or by the CCP government sitting in Beijing?
Well, the current Dalai Lama, I mean, he enjoys a certain prestige as followers all over because he was from China. I mean, the CIA helped to arrange for his escape to India from Mustang. I mean, that's all part of history. And it was in the interest of America at the time to create something outside China in order to create an inconvenience to China, which can be used against China at an appropriate time. They do that in Xinjiang, they do that with many countries. And of course, China dislikes it. And this has become a problem between China and India. But if you go to Tibet, and you go to the monasteries there, and the infrastructure there, life goes on. So you look at the last Panchen Lama, when he died, there was a reincarnation which was managed by a High Lama in Beijing. And later on, the Chinese government found out that this High Lama was in contact with the Dalai Lama. So they abrogated the entire process. And what did they do?
They
disappeared
that kid.
That kid disappeared. And what did they do? They went back to the Qianlong emperor, the late 18th century, and said, okay, we go back to all those rules. And Emperor Qianlong, who was a very great emperor, actually donated a golden urn for the final drawing of lots. So they wheeled it out. And the current Panchen Lama was discovered and elected on that basis.
Yeah.
And he enjoys high legitimacy within China itself.
Within China itself.
China itself.
You just answered my question. That's the debate over here that I'm seeking some clarity on. Does political sovereignty that you have delineated, does that equate to religious authority or religious legitimacy in the greater Buddhist world? And that includes India, Thailand, Cambodia, Sri Lanka, etc.
Well, look at the Buddhist community in Singapore. They kind of take a relaxed view that if there's a High Lama from India, they would give it respect. If it's from China, they will also give it respect. So both the Dalai Lama has visited Singapore before in the past. I called on the Panchen Lama in Beijing and extended to him an invitation from the Buddhist community in Singapore. And if he were to come to Singapore, I think he will be accorded all the respect due to him. And in the future, if there are two Dalai Lamas, then I think the one from China will be accorded formal respect. The one reincarnated outside China may still have some respect, but it will not be the same as the one from China. Because the one from China has got monasteries, has got all the legitimacy of procedure and process and ritual.
I think the worry is that when it's so coercive, where the Dalai Lama appointed Panchen Lama has been disappeared, is when concerns come up and this is something that even Indian Buddhist thought leaders as well talk about, that why would a child be disappeared like that? I mean, even if you want to appoint your own Panchen Lama. And that is the question with the new Dalai Lama as well, eventual new Dalai Lama.
The reason was because that child was appointed in consultation with the Dalai Lama.
Dharamshala, yeah.
And China thought, hey, you're not supposed to do this. You're supposed to go observe the procedures. So they saw in it an operation. But I don't blame them for reversing it. If I were them, I'd reverse it too.
Idea is that, is he under arrest? Why don't we see him?
Oh, I don't know what's happened to him. I mean, I have no idea.
Okay, I'm going to conclude by asking you a little forecasting, if you will. In the next 20 years and all, which powers do you see in the region really dominating? China, obviously, you've mentioned it, but do you see India, parts of ASEAN? What region, or American influence in the region? Where do you what power centers do you see shaping up?
Well, McKinsey does annual reports forecasting economic progress in the year 2050. And China will be the world's biggest economy. The second and third will be the US and India. It's not clear who will be at that time. The fourth will be Indonesia. And these are all demographics. So ASEAN will be an important region, but we will never be integrated like the European Union. But we'll have a loose integration and a loose unity, but good enough for our own purposes.
I'm glad you brought up Indonesia. That recently PM Modi went to Indonesia as well. Do you see both the countries positioned almost similarly right now?
No, both. I mean, Indonesia, the Bahasa Indonesia is full of Sanskrit words. And till today, the Mahabharata, Ramayana are played and replayed every day in different parts of Indonesia. So, of course, these are kindred civilizations. And in fact, President Prabowo wanted Prime Minister Modi to have a special relationship between Nalanda University and Jambi University, because in the 9th century, I think, the king of Srivijaya made an endowment to Nalanda University of some dozens of villages as an endowment for the sustenance of the monks. And this is all recorded in a copper plate, which is still in the Delhi Museum. So there is a desire to strengthen links between Indonesia and India, and indeed among all of us in ASEAN. You see, the more our relationship with China grows, the more our instinct to diversify is strengthened. The more we want America to be around, the more we want India to succeed. So that when we deal with China, we have alternatives. Otherwise, the Chinese will have too much influence on us.
You've been at the high table of diplomacy now for almost a decade when you were in your position as the foreign minister in Singapore. How did you see qualitative changes in the way India worked in the early 2000s, 2010 to now, India of now?
No, India needs a much bigger foreign ministry. It's got a very elite institution. The examinations to join are very difficult. So all of them are highly intelligent, but there are not enough of them. China, as I said earlier, is used to dealing with multiple problems at the same time in different directions. India inherited its independence from the Raj. Foreign policy was handled from London. So foreign policy from Delhi has a relatively short historical period of experience. It needs to be built up. And I know they've been trying, but the institutions are conservative. But I would here publicly call for a significant expansion of the Indian Foreign Ministry.
Dr. Jaishankar is listening.
印度 ANI 主持人采访新加坡前外长杨荣文，看起来很客气，问题里却处处埋着针对中国的预设。从中国崛起会不会变成霸权，到中国开源 AI 是不是新的债务陷阱，再到达赖喇嘛转世和西藏问题，主持人不断围绕着弯子给中国设套，杨荣文全程不急不躁，从中国的历史传统、中印关系、人工智能，一直讲到藏传佛教和外部势力介入，很多地方几句话把主持人的框架给拆掉了。本期布世界再补充一些背景与看法，看看这位印度主持人的高级黑最后是怎么样被杨荣文轻松拿捏下来的。本来中印同为人口体量庞大的发展中的大国，陆地直接接壤，理论上本该依托地缘优势深度绑定的产业链，现实双向共赢，实现双向共赢。但是过去5年，印度却长期给中资设壁垒，各种隐性的审查、准入门槛接连不断。这是中国企业不愿出海布局，这不是中国企业不愿意出海布局，而是印度单方面竖起了高墙，主动隔绝中国资本与技术入场。局面在2026年3月彻底扭转，印度官方正式出台新规，放宽中资限制，主要境外投资主体只要中方持股不超 10%， 就能直接的自动审核通道，不用漫长的人工审核。电子、太阳能、高端设备制造这类印度重点扶持赛道，只要本土企业掌握股权，中资项目审批限时压缩是60天以内。此外，签证政策同步开放，更是戳破了印度过去的贸易保护的深层弊端。此前数年，印度长期限制中国工程师入境，本土工厂引进大量的国产设备无人调试，产线故障无法修复。路段数据显示，4年签证管制来的产能缺口，直接让印度的电子制造白白损失了150亿美元的产出。说白了，过去印度总忌惮中国 产业实力太强，害怕本土市场被抢占，等到真把中国技术工程师挡在门外，才猛然发现自身体系根本没法独立运转，机器离了中方技术人员根本就是无法正常投产，所以印度是嫉妒我们的。这位主持人的表现看清了印度的本质，这样的国家怎么可能有进步呢？好了，本期视频就到这里，我们下期再见，感谢大家的分享、订阅以及转发，谢谢大家。